Mai hara mai ki tēnei o tātou nei hui o tira ko taku hui tuatahi hei kai whakahaere o tēnei huihuinga. Nō reira, hei te hehe au te mihi atu kia koutou katoa. So just an acknowledgement, this is my first chair moment. So I've been quite nervous leading up to it, but in saying that, it's wonderful to look around and see my family in front of me, my whānau. So an acknowledgement also to our committee members who are sitting in the chamber today, as well as our public and media also. Also to those watching online, tēnā koutou. Can I just remind everyone to turn off your mobile phones, please? A break will also be taken to allow members to clear urgent messages if necessary. There will be a morning break at 11 a.m. and also lunch at 1 p.m. Nō reira, kei te hehe au te mihi atu ki a koe aroha nāu anō hoki tō tātou nei karakia I tēnei ata.
Morena everyone. I'm going to say it in English and te reo for those who don't understand te reo. Manakitia tēnei hui, manakitia tēnei rōpū, manakitia tēnei whānau, arahina ngā kōrero, arahina ngā pātai, kia puta ai te marama. Host this event, take care of this group, take care of this family, guide the information, guide the questions in order for the light to shine. Amene.
Me mihi ka tika ki a koe aroha, and aroha is our Te Tatou representative today. I will now call for any apologies, please. We do have Councillor Tapsell as well as Councillor Kumar this morning. Are there any others? Apai, thank you. Nore, thank you. Here, Steve. And a seconder. Kia ora. And can we put that motion to the vote, please? All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest for today's hui? Appear to be none. Thank you. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? No, there appear to be none. Thank you. Oh, wow, this is going okay. Right. So I would now like to ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting, minutes 6th of August 2020, be confirmed as a true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson, and also Mr. Hurd. Kia ora. And I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Okay. Staff reports now. So we now have the operational report for June to July 2020. I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, please. Kia ora, Ms. Bray, and kia ora, Councillor McPherson. And we'll put that motion to the vote, please. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Right, so I've just got a matter here that was raised last week in confidence in Council's tendering and decision-making process, which was questioned. There have been subsequent discussions on this matter, and it is important for our staff, our contractors, our funders such as Waka Kotahi, and the general public to know that Council is in fact confident that the tendering and decision-making processes followed are robust and that the decisions made are in the overall best interests of our community. In the case of street lighting, 55% of operational costs and 85% of capital costs are funding by Waka Kotahi. Correspondingly, they require Council to adhere to stringent procurement practices and audit our compliance with these. As the Deputy Chair, and today the Chair, I therefore wish to move the following motion: that the Operations and Monitoring Committee has confidence in the organisation's tendering processes and acknowledges the professionalism of staff involved. Can I have a mover for that, please? Oh, I'm moving, sorry, I do apologise for that. And a seconder? Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell. And can we just put that to motion to the vote, please? Aye.
A point of order.
Yes.
Is it possible to have a discussion prior to the vote?
Thank you for that question, Councillor McPherson. The discussion was held in Council in confidence last week, where we did come to the conclusion, and I also appreciate that at that point you had declared your interest with that and you didn't approve with the motion. So if we put it to the vote now and you still feel that way, I'm happy for you to remain with your opinion. Kia ora. So can I please call for all those in favour of that motion being put to the table? Okay, and Councillor McPherson? Councillor Bentley? Thank you.
Chair, can I call for a show of hands on the vote, please?
Yes, kia ora. Okay, show of hands, please. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Thank you. Apai. So now I'd like to invite each group manager to overview their group reports. Nō reira, ko te wahine tuatahi, ko koe tērā Gina.
Another point of order.
Yes.
I think an apostrophe before the S in organisations,
Good spotting.
because it's referring
Yes.
to the council.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Tēnā koe, Gina. Maho te wā.
Tēnā tātou. I will take my report as read. There are only two minor things that I wanted to note. One is that obviously after having written the report through to today, there is a reference in there to the Rotorua wastewater treatment plant, and of course everyone will have seen the announcement made last Friday. The other point I wanted to note was that in preparing for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, unfortunately Aronui, which was the main program that we were relying on for our celebrations of Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori later this month, the Aronui Festival unfortunately has been cancelled due to lockdown and the levels that we're in respect of COVID, creating too much uncertainty. So my team is currently trying to find a way to quickly throw together some digital events, both within council and outside of council. We're still working on that program. We have 2 weeks to pull something together, so we're working on that. But other than that, I'll take my report as read. Kia ora. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just ask a question? Gina, I noticed that there was a pōhiri held for new staff in the 10th of August, and then something came through, I think, today to say another one has been cancelled, but it only was for one staff member. Or have I got that wrong? Something came through on my... So do we have two, or don't we just have one pōhiri for all staff when they, at a certain time?
Yes, we generally have pōhiri held periodically through the year, of course, because we are limiting the number of new staff coming on. There are far fewer this year because we just don't have new staff starting. Occasionally, though, there will be a mihi whakatau, which is an informal welcome, which departments or teams might extend to a particular staff member. That's not part of the overall schedule that we run as council. That's just an informal team-based approach generally. Kia ora.
Any other questions for Jean? Kia ora, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, are we likely to see some deliverables in terms of papakāinga with the housing strategy, so actually seeing some action shortly?
So the housing strategy is up for discussion later on in the program. We have started discussions with other agencies, including the Māori Land Court and Te Puni Kōkiri, to try and work out where the gaps are and what we can do. We've engaged Arapita, so Arapita has stepped down from the Te Ahure role but is still working for us on particular projects, so he's leading the papakāinga program at the moment, and there is some preparatory work that's happening in that space at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Gina, can I just ask how the engagement with iwi and Māori landowners on the Tarouera wastewater project is progressing. I know it was disrupted by level 4 lockdown. Are we making progress there?
Yes, I think it's really important to understand the interconnection between the Tarouera discussions, the project that we're doing at Rotuiti, and also the Rotorua wastewater treatment plant. And for Māori communities, they're acutely aware of what's happening in each of those projects. And from our perspective, it was really important to reach agreement in respect of the way forward on Rotorua before we started to push too hard in respect of Tarouera. There was a CIA completed at the end of last year, which we have sent out to landowners and the iwi authorities, and we're just programming some additional meetings now. There have been discussions in the context of the Rotorua wastewater treatment plant, but essentially we needed to put that to bed before we push too hard on any other projects. We're dealing with the same community, and so constantly going to the same community is really challenging in terms of the resource that they have to bring to the discussions and the complexity of the issues that they need to work through.
Any further questions for Ms. Rangi? Pariko, tēnā koe, Gina. I'd like to now call upon JP Gaston, and we're following on from page 12 for the strategy group report.
Morena, everyone. Just as a brief overview of the information we've provided in the agenda today, I've got Rosemary here beside me if there's any questions about the sustainability options paper, which is attached because Rosemary's obviously been managing that contract for the last year or so. So just going through the various things we've raised within the report. Obviously we've received all the feedback, and the feedback process is closed now for the housing strategy. So we'll be bringing that to the SPNF committee next week for confirmation. So we'll bring back a summary of that feedback and also identify the amendments we've made to that document. So the key stakeholders involved have had their chance to review, and we've made a number of minor amendments to the document to present to you next week. The other one there is the Tatou Panamu locality planning approach, or the wellbeing plan for the east side. So councillors received a briefing on that document, I believe last week, and so that's now out for consultation, being led obviously by that community who developed that plan. So we'll be coming back with a report. They've asked that a councillor be appointed to help review the community feedback. So that's a really important way we can support that community in finalising that plan. So that process is also underway. And happy to answer any other questions councillors may have on the remainder of the report.
Thank you, JP. Morena, Mr. Waru. Norita, do we have any partai this morning for JP or Rosemary? Councillor Rotorua?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, JP. It is around the housing strategy, and I know that you already intend next week to bring that. So those changes that have been made as a result of stakeholder, will they be clearly identified for us to look at what they are, rather than just having them changed and we get a document that perhaps is a little bit different? I know you said there were minor changes, but I'd just like to make sure that we have some look at those before they actually are incorporated into the strategy. Yeah. Unless they are very, very minor.
Madam Chair, we will go through and make sure we can highlight those. We've actually got a summary of how we're tracking them, so we might just include that as an additional supplementary attachment or a tracked change version, just so you can be really clear about what's changed in that final document.
Any further questions? Kia ora, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on the east side locality planning is how are we proposing to engage with business? Is there a business group, or are you consulting directly with the businesses in that locality?
My understanding is that Rob and Lee, who are leading that process with Tatou Panamu Group, are expecting to make that part of the engagement, is that they'll specifically request any feedback from business owners in that vicinity. Obviously, that plan also picks up on some of the feedback that we'd had during the spatial planning process about the future of industrial development on the east side. So again, that's signalled in the plan. So really important topic for engagement with that business sector out east side.
Sorry, so who will actually be, it will be directly with businesses as opposed to through a business sort of overarching group?
My understanding is they'll seek to, or an invitation to have a collective meeting, and if they require specific, or if anyone wants to talk to them specifically, they will go and talk to individuals.
Any further questions from the floor? Councillor McPherson?
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. John Paul, it's a parallel question to the previous question. The collective has a specific representation. I acknowledge that. What are the groups that are not currently represented on that collective? How will they, I'm talking here about residents now, how will they be consulted? Thank you.
I think that's the important part of what the collective has done. So they've worked through their networks and the stakeholders on the east side. This is when they had hoped to take their plan out more formally to engage with all community groups and stakeholders across the east side. So my understanding is there's specific letters going out, and then we're providing some of that support to make sure there's the wider consultation that would normally go into a planning process. So that's really the support that we're putting behind the collective in this space, is making sure that as a feedback process, it's as open as any of the other processes that council normally holds.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? JP? Rosemary? Hariko? Tēnā kōrua. Nau mai hara mai ki tēnei o tātou nei pau. Ara ko Jocelyn Mikaere from our operations group.
Morena tātou. I'll take my report as read. I wanted to just flag that the work we talk about the aquatic centre in the report, and this weekend we will begin fencing and getting ourselves ready to begin work on Monday next week on the outdoor 50-metre pool. That was the only thing I wanted to point out, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yes,
I think just because of the wider interest, because it's all happening down at the lakefront, I know the answer, but a lot of councillors are asked, when will the playground be finished, and when do you think stage 1 will be completed?
I'll get Rob to come over and help me out with this one. We do, there's settling happening on that playground at the moment, and work's due to start early in the new year, Rob, to be completed by March.
Kia ora tātou. Yes, the playground's happening in several sort of sequences. Yes. So there's a bit happening now with the sound shell end of the volcanic playground area that will be finished very soon. Then the eastern end, the opposite end is going to be completed in the next school term section. So we're sort of working around the school holidays. So there's a bit done available for school holidays. Then in the term there'll be another bit, and then the big bit down the far end, that preload, should be settled about March or April, and they'll be starting that work, and it will that work will run through the winter and be ready sort of mid to spring 21. But there'll be sequences of stuff open the whole way through.
Apai, Councillor Donaldson, and then Councillor Locality.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Jocelyn, thank you for the opportunity for elected members to have a look through Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre this week. A lot of challenges revealed there by the deconstruction that's happened ahead of getting on with that. And great to see that even though there's some specialist work involved in there, that it's expected 64% of the construction will go to local contractors. So that's encouraging. I'm just interested in the anticipated timeframes for commencing the work and completing and having that centre open for shows, the community.
Thank you for the question. We will be looking to bring a contract to council by the end of this month, with the view to starting our construction work in October this year. In terms of the completion dates, we're just putting together the final stages with our contractors around when the final dates will be. We're really confident we'll be open by 2022, but we're also confident that by the end of next year the work will be finished, but we're just wanting to get our final quotes in to ensure that the fit out and commissioning can occur as well, because the date when the build is finished will be different to the date when we'll be able to open.
Thank you, Councillor Rokawate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cuero Park, the Saturday morning market. Can you just tell us how that's going? I mean, I know it's early days, but it seems to be a lot of cars there on the Saturday, and it's certainly well used as a parking space during the week. So was that a good move in terms of the market? And is it a smaller? It looks a smaller space, but certainly people seem to be going there.
I'm going to let Rob take this one. The feedback we've had is really positive, but Rob, you might have a bit more.
Thank you. The only bit to add, yes, the public and Rotary North feedback has been very positive. The use of space is a better setup, and obviously the facilities are better. Unfortunately, the official opening's been pushed away a little bit because of the level 2 restrictions, but as soon as the government's made its recent announcements on its plans, we'll be letting councillors know as to what's happening in terms of a more official opening of that space, but good feedback so far.
Hi, thank you, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question around the visitor centre. What's the likely delay, and will that increase the footprint of the proposed building with more commercial development there?
At this point, what we're doing is waiting. We're just allowing CNI the opportunity to come back to us with some further advice around the commercial stage. We're not intending to increase the size of the visitor centre that we're looking to build, but there may be some usage of the other building that might occur. But we're just waiting for some advice around the commercial use at the moment.
So we don't have a time frame of how much longer the project will be delayed by?
We expect to be able to restart the project by the end of the year. Tell you what, JP, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The process time extension is probably no more than 3 months. My understanding is that CNI were keen to make sure that they could engage with some potential tenants and just get a clearer understanding of how some of the commercial space might be utilised within the building. And that enables Will to recommence that design competition process that it started. So at this stage, it's about 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just refer to page 16, the bottom of the page, policy planning on plan change to do with Pukehangi Heights. This process is going to set precedents in all sorts of ways, isn't it? It's the first time we've used this fast tracking, or what's referred to as the streamlined plan process. And once the hearings are over, and I understand they've been put back by a week, After that, the commissioners are going to put their recommendations through to the minister on whether the area should be rezoned, but secondly, it's going to produce a rule framework. Is that rule framework going to be unique to this development, or will it be a rule framework which will apply to all subsequent developments? It's my lack of understanding in this area that if you could fill in some gaps for me, I'd be
I may
grateful.
have a similar lack of understanding, Councillor McPherson. JP's been involved in the Pukehangi plan change alongside our planning team, but I'm not sure that even JP will be able to answer this one because it's a new process. So we're very much working, and we'll work with the commissioners. And I'm thinking if a framework emerges, we would look to see how it would be utilised in other areas. JP, did you want to add anything further?
Madam Chair, the fast-track plan change process, as you've described, Councillor, it takes away sort of one of the parts of a normal RMA plan change process, which is the sort of that right of appeal. So in effect, what you're doing is you're going through a hearing process, and they make a decision, and that's signed off by a minister. So you've actually taken away the appeal right or the chance for people to seek further relitigations of it. So that's the fast-tracking part, is you take away that chance to go into an environment court process following the hearings. So certainly, I think there's a care needed in the application of that kind of process, because the whole plan change processes are quite important community processes, and particularly for areas. And so one of the things is, my understanding from the way the team are developing the east side plan change discussion at this stage is that they would see it going through a normal process because of the scale of the east side redevelopment. So I think I'm not entirely sure whether the fast track process is being retained, but again, there needs to be the justification and the grounds to apply to the minister to use the fast track approach. I think what we would have to do is be very careful and very clear as to why we think that would be an important approach to have to in effect circumvent the normal RMA process of a plan change. So again, it's an important question to have, and I think before we would ask that, it would be put before council, just as we did with Plan Change 2 on the Pukehangi side.
Thank you for that contextual, through you, Chair, that contextual description there. Could I leave it on the table then that once it's clear whether or not that rule framework, which is going to be recommended by the hearing commissioners, is that going to be a generic rule framework for all subsequent plan changes? Is it unique to this particular project?
Yes, you must apply it to just the individual plan change area where it's being applied. Right. So it is only being applied in this instance with the recommendation having come from council to ask permission of the minister to undertake a fast track process for the Pukehangi area, so Plan Change 2.
So it's unique. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rotorua.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. JP, I just wanted to ask, because I don't think I've kept up to date well enough with the government was proposing, obviously through the review of the RMA and some of the changes. How is that going? Because I've sort of lost the plot of it on that one. But you'll be up to date on that, I'm sure.
Madam Chair, no, I'm not. Sorry. Now we're getting into a level of expertise that hops away from both Jocelyn and I into needing Jason Ward probably to give you some more certainty about where those RMA RMA Act changes are. The only one I would add is we've seen an update of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which imposes a number of requirements on council. So we were intending on bringing back a presentation talking about that National Policy Statement on Urban Development and what that requires of council. And again, that links to the RMA processes and plan change processes. So I think if you want to have more of a deep dive into the RMA changes, Jason is probably the right person to bring to the table.
We've been recently in receipt of a book that's about this thick that we're ploughing our way through. So we will bring something more detailed back with councillors.
Thank you. And yes, Mayor Chadwick.
If I could speak to that, I was Chair of Local Government and Environment with the last raft of changes to the RMA Act. They take years. So the proposed changes will come to a new cabinet, and then cabinet papers are drafted, and then they go to a select committee. The select committee calls for submissions, and that's a long process. So the changes, unless they're fast-tracked, will step through the same process I envisage. And it's huge. I'm sure you've read it, Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you. Mr. Waru?
Tēnā koe te chairman, ka pai tono hoki ki reira. Hoi no mōrena korua, JP, Jocelyn. Just in regards to the same kaupapa, wanted to ask around the issues that are raised here around the cultural values and the water quality. Are you able to expand on what that actually means in this context?
Sorry, and what part of the report is that?
On the same place.
Okay, you can change.
Yes. So it says in here, the other issues include protection of cultural values, water quality, te harane. So, yeah, just wondering what that actually entails. Because it's a term that's thrown around quite easily nowadays.
Can I come back to you with that and provide some further context, unless Gina has anything that she'd like to throw in? I'm bringing everyone in now. Water values, Carl. So I'll come back to you with some fuller details around that.
Kauai, thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Any further questions? Kariko, tēnā koe, Jocelyn. Now I'd like to welcome Stavros Michael to the table. Thank you, Stavros, for the infrastructure group. Stavros will be speaking to 4 PowerPoint presentations, one being Infracore PGF Fund, NZTA Tengai Road, number 3 Plastics, and the Mea Whakamutunga Stormwater.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. As you said, Madam Chair, we'll take the report as read, but we've got 3 or 4 issues we want to raise with you or to make you aware of, and quite happy to take any questions, with these areas or add to any other part, of our report. So we'll start with the Eastern Corridor improvements. As you're aware, we are progressing gradually. What's happening here? Okay. We are put it slowly down because it seems to be sensitive. We are progressing gradually to implementation of stage 1 between Sala and Isles Roads, and the NZTA and ourselves are also reaching the final stages of what we call the business case stage 2 for Tinai Road, which covers the area, the length of the road between Isles Roads and the airport. That area, as you know, has received some CIP funding to the tune of about $35 million from the recent government allocations, and that basically unlocks a potential to fast-track some of the significant or urgent improvements that are required into that corridor. Can I remind elected members that there are 2 primary reasons why we have been pursuing improvements to Tinai roads over the last 2-3 years. One, of course, is the fact that we have agreed to uplift the REA designation that's been dormant for about 60 years, and we had a commitment from NZTA to invest in Tinai roads. But ultimately, what we want to achieve is this phase of the corridor, which anticipates a full laning all the way from Miles Road to the airport with an airport roundabout or similar structure to form basically an eastern gate into Rotorua. That is what we are pursuing. To get there, we will do it in stages, and we are also making sure that NZTA are pursuing funding for the full allocation of that event. We've got $35 million from the CIP, but probably we need additional around 30 or 35 million just to reach to that stage. But the second objective of pursuing these improvements here is to unlock the land development potential on either side of T9 roads. And again, you've talked about earlier with JP and Jocelyn, the plan changes and district plan changes, but the ultimate objective is that we operate all these areas of work under the umbrella of land development and the broader housing strategy. And I'll come later to you about another element to that, which is stormwater management, and that's why I wanted to bring it to your, to your awareness on that. But ultimately, we having these key intersections which are proposed to be signalized, and the reason for that, of course, is we increasing housing stock into that area. The entry and exit onto the state highway needs to be controlled appropriately, so eliminates congestion, improves safety, and makes sure that accessibility by various parties, of all levels of competency and capability is available onto the road. You will notice that a plan from all the way from Miles Road to the airport incorporates shear paths on either side of the road on the similar basis as we're constructing our shear paths, and that would be a significant improvement to the works, to our endeavors to enable people to travel in and out of the central city via cycling, walking, micromobility scooters, disabled people, with their disability scooters and so on. And I think that is a significant part and parcel of our ability to have an integrated transport plan and system that allows a choice of transport modes. So we're making progress into that. NZTA are talking to locally affected property owners, especially in some of these intersections. There'll be some changes of property boundaries, especially some of the property boundaries happen to sit on what we call State Highway Road Reserve, and they need to be reallocated. And again, that is something that you need to be aware of what that is progressing. And the intention is to finish all this work by the end of September, early October, so the technical people can start putting into effect technical designs that will be integrated with our stormwater management plans in the area and commence construction as soon as we can. Any questions about that? Thank you.
Mayor Chadwick?
It was a question that I saw raised by Phil Thomas when he was at the public transport meeting, about why we cross the road and then go back. The cycleways. I didn't get that either. So I'm not sure the logic behind it. Probably he had it, but I haven't got it. I can't see why we cross the road.
Well, this is, thank you, Your Worship. This is stage one. Obviously, we work, NZTA and us are working on the existing available corridor. But if you go to the next phase here, go to stage two, you would notice the blue phase has got shared corridors on both sides. So the first stage, the dark blue line indicates that in stage one, in this level there, we will give priority to implement changes to key intersections and make the sheer cycle and walking corridors all the way to the airport as safe as possible. But in some respects, NZTA needs to negotiate land changes with some current landowners to be able to achieve the ultimate goal of that sheer path on both sides. So it's a staged approach. It's not permanent.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros, thanks for your report. The medium strip that's going in from Tarawea Road heading towards Isles Road, traffic wishing to come out of the businesses on the heading east on the left-hand side, how do they get to go back into Rotorua Central?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. I think that became a little bit a subject of discussion in recent times between ourselves, the businesses, and NZTA. There are three elements to that. One is that at the moment, some of the vehicles coming out of these businesses on the left-hand side are able to cross the road and do a right turn to come to here towards the town. However, increasingly, as the traffic volumes are changing from the 45,000 vehicles a day to up to Tarawera, down to 30,000 vehicles from Tarawera to Isles, 25,000 vehicles to Ofata, this kind of maneuver is becoming extremely dangerous and risky. So NZTA have been asked to look into the options of how to navigate that. I anticipate from a traffic management perspective, those vehicles needs to go at the moment, turn left, go to the Ofata roundabout and do a U-turn at the roundabout and come back. In the fullest of time, going to have a four-lane state highway all the way to the airport. We're also going to prepare the Vaughan Road to be acting as a return corridor to come back into the city and join back to Tarawera intersection. Some people said there are significant volumes of heavy vehicles coming out of these businesses. NZTA and ourselves are at the moment undertaking a facts assessment because out of the 30,000 vehicles that use that corridor, we believe the number of heavy truck vehicles are going to be very small numbers for that. And as ultimately some decisions have to be made by the state highway owner, which is NZTA, in terms of their safety standards. You cannot aspire for an urban motorway, four-lane motorway, but treat that motorway like an urban, a rural road. It needs to be taken into consideration safety standards and make sure that if there is, in some instances, a very small fraction of the traffic required to take a bit of a longer route to come back, then that's an appropriate way to do it. But we haven't reached a conclusion yet. NZTA are doing a technical assessment, and they are still reviewing the option whether the Ofata intersection will be done through signalization or roundabout, and we'll come back to you in due course for that. Just to give you an indication, sometimes people talk about excessive delays. The travel distance ranges between 4 and 5 minutes in differences.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just back to the cycleway question, Stavros, and I was a bit alarmed by the comment of the Chair that was reported in the media. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that work around the cycleways is in collaboration and consultation with the community. That's been done by us, and it takes into account the fact that all the schools out there are on one side of the state highway, and students live on both sides of the state highway, and where we've put cycleways in, there's an 80% uptake in children riding to school. So I think that answers that question, but if you could just confirm that we're working with the community on the siting of those cycleways.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the answer is yes, we're working with the local community, but also we're working with the wider cycling and schools community to make sure that we have a consistent approach to the... Remember, the ultimate aim here is mode shift. And mode shift, as I spoke earlier, we're trying to encourage as many of our 60,000 school kids to use walking or cycling to school. And obviously the definition of these areas hangs around with that. What is not shown here, of course, is that the CIP allocated to us $5 million of funding to do local roads. And we are at the moment designing improvements to Vaughan Road with sheer paths at least on one side and appropriate pedestrian crossings, improving Morris Street connection, which leads to 3 schools. We've been awarded another $100,000 for innovative streets funding from NZTA last week to actually do improvements around the Linmore School. So all these sort of things are coming part and parcel of a wider master plan for mode shifting and are always in consultation with affected parties and local communities.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for that answer, because I get a number of communications about residents who are concerned for safety of children, particularly around Linmore School at pick-up and drop-off time. And so that's great to hear. The more we can get them cycling to school rather than being SUV'd to school, the better.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. And I'm also aware that we do have a school, a kura, in fact, on Robinson Avenue, so at the moment. So that's Te Wharekura o Ngātirongo Mai. Mayor Chadwick, did you have a final comment?
Well, no, it's not in your report, but some questions around the planning on the Western Corridor. that's happening concurrently. Can you just update us on that, Stavros?
I think your workshop, you mean the Nogodaha site? Yeah, there's a $14 million allocation, as we discussed earlier, that addresses the Nogodaha roundabout and a stretch of about 11 kilometers towards Hamilton. Predominantly, the emphasis there is about improving road safety as a result of historical road crashes. And that work is commencing, it was meant to commence in October because of delays we had recently with changes to alert levels and so on. The people who manage that process from Auckland, they had some delays, but now they anticipate physical work to start in early November, but major utilization in January to do that work. And that it will be progressing gradually from early in the new year.
Could I just ask a supplementary on that through the chair? And you won't have even heard about it yet, but we had the Kauai Cemetery meeting yesterday and were concerned about the safety of people coming out of Kauai. And if we're looking at the roundabout, it seems logical that we take it back further to include Kauai. It's terribly unsafe when we leave that, as you know, but yeah, I just wondered if we can get that factored into those initial discussions.
Thank you. Yes, the scope of the project, the 14 million project, does not extend all the way to Kauai roundabout. However, or sort of a cemetery. However, this from Ferry Springs, where the four-laning stops to the roundabout, it's about 1.6 kilometers of stretch of roads that needs improvements, and it's on our demands, I suppose, or expectations that NZTA extend that four-laning all the way to the roundabout. I can't give you an indication about timing at the moment, but it is part and parcel of that consideration now.
Thank you, Stavros. Your next presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will take a little bit of time on that, councillors, because I think it is very important, at least at a high level, to get a bit of a context into what we call stormwater master planning. You will be seeing that in the near future as part of the LTP, in your workshops, coming to more fleshed out detail. And I saw Rawiri asked a question earlier about what do you mean by cultural impacts and quality of water. Stormwater is one of those things that incorporates both of them because it's got both a quality and a quantity and risk management perspective. So I will give you some quick indication as to what is happening at the moment with regards to our stormwater master planning. Now, we often hear, both in the media and in public conversations, whether it's in workshops or whether it's in public meetings or whether it's social media, the question of let's fix our stormwater infrastructure. I think it is quite important to highlight the fact that we are living in a basin, especially around Rotorua. Lake Rotorua contains somewhere in the region of 800 million cubic meters of water. That is basically the result of stormwater management. It's a stormwater storage that comes there from around the caldera. Now, the average system of rivers and overland flows that go into the lake produce somewhere in the region of about 43 million cubic meters of stormwater in an average rainfall of about 10%, 1 in 10 year duration. We're not talking about a significant deluge of 1 in 100 years, but just an average rainfall of about 1 in 10 years produces about 43 million cubic meters of water. Just to give you a bit of a context, when you're talking about wastewater, we're producing about 20,000 cubic meters of wastewater a day. Now, that average rainfall for a similar event for a whole day is about 200 times more water reaching the lake than the amount of water we receive as wastewater on a daily basis, on a very low average consideration. Now, also remember that we have a partner relationship with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council that manages the lake's water levels. The Rotorua Lake's water levels are managed by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council with a consented ability to, in a fluctuating level, about 300 millimeters up and down. So that influences the calculations and the considerations we give to how much water we are permitted to allow to reach the lake in a given situation. And if you only consider the 300 millimeter level of fluctuation into the lake, that's about 24 million cubic meters of stormwater, new stormwater coming into the lake before it breaches that 300 millimeters of threshold that the regional council has got. But when you consider that your average rainfall of 1 in 10 years produces 43 million cubics, double that amount of water, though that generates a necessity for us to actually ask some quiz question as to when we're doing our greenfields development, and you can see, I'm not sure you can, around, this is the eastern side, you can see very clearly that most of the future development sites will be around these greenfield areas. We'll have circles, and those circles, it is where we believe our master plan will design, detail, storage and attenuation of water. And the reason for that is that when you develop greenfield areas into urban areas, you generate a lot more runoff of water. And in order to manage the overall effect of that additional water and to maintain the maximum 24 million cubic meters of water that lakes are allowed to fluctuate, basically what you need to do is you design processes through which you control the flow of stormwater into the lake at the level and the rate that is not bigger than 24 million cubic meters a day. And that's a challenge. It is a challenge because contrary to some of the popular beliefs, water leaving from a higher ground, whether it's to the west or to the east, it needs to flow through existing already urbanized area. And contrary to some of the beliefs too, is that only about 10% of that water goes through piped networks. The other 90% flows through what we call overland flow paths, which are roads, reserves, and so on. So from engineering perspective, we really need to make sure that we hold the water in the newly developed areas for a reasonable time and for a reasonable amount of duration or in terms of storm events that would allow you to flow to the lake at a rate that does two things. One, it does not inundate urban properties in between. You can see from the high side to the low side, and it does not breach the regional council's ability to manage the water lakes more than 300 millimeters. So this creates for us significant logistical and technical challenges, but our master plan aims to achieve that. So those kind of considerations, and the same thing applies to, you can see here, it's a bit closer detail. See the blue, the circles involve areas where we plan to hold and store water sufficiently in order to allow us to balance its flow. The blue lines indicate existing water courses, and the dark blue lines shows where we're going to do intensive augmentation of existing rainfall channels. And it's a bit of a closer look. And again, this is the west side. You are talking about earlier the plan change too, in Puke Hanging site. And as you can see there, it's readily visible, I hope, that those sites needs to hold water in the vicinity of the development for sufficient periods of time to feed it into existing water courses and in the path of those water courses to create further attenuation or storage capacity so the properties downhill do not get inundated with stormwater. So you will see that coming gradually through the LTP, where we're going to say, look, we have identified what needs to be done. We have identified where it needs to be done. We have identified at what quantity needs to be done. And we have identified the funding requirement for the next 10, 20, 30 years that would allow to take place. Fortunately, for the east side, this side here, we've got about $15 million allocated at CIP projects to allow us to start doing what we call the community or the bulk storage in the near future development areas, and that will allow us to progress it in a rapid way. To the west side, we have access to this 3 Waters Reform funding program, and we will allocate a lion's share of that towards that direction to allow and enable the PC2 changes in the Pukehangi site. But again, it is quite important, again, to leave you, I'm finishing with that, to leave you with a message that this is a big challenge. It is not something that can be fixed overnight. You get approached by many people, I understand it many times, about fix a problem. But remember, you do have in an existing network, which is in the value of about $200 million, in the pipe system that only accommodates about 10% of that flows. The other 80, 90% needs to go through open spaces. And therefore, reconfiguring these standards that have been in effect for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it will take some time. In the meantime, we need to do whatever we need to do to hold the water at sufficient time frames and levels that allows it to be flowing in a way that is in a controlled way, so we don't endanger the viability of existing properties. So thank you. Take questions if you wish, please.
Thank you, Madam. Mayor Chadwick.
Just a question to you, Stavros, that you've raised it before with us. I think it was in our last long-term plan. We looked at the cost implications for us as a district for management of stormwater in total, and it was quite an eye-watering figure. Can we include some of those costs as you have with the eastern subdivision, and we got some stormwater investment there? Can we use the housing plan to try to buffer that cost implication?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there are, I wear two hats.
Yeah.
From one hat, I'm the engineer's hat, and I would say that my task at the moment is to prepare a 30-year plan for stormwater management, and to identify that plan in a sense that meets relevant engineering, national policy and regional policy standards, and give advice to elected members as to what I think those standards should be and the configuration of the stormwater management. Then as an executive team member, my other hat is to say, okay, now we know what we need to do and we know roughly what it's going to cost us. And then becomes a funding and revenue policy. You can recover, as I said, we already have got access for stormwater to somewhere in the region of about 15 and let's say another 5, 6 or 7 million. There's about $20 million now from government funding. I would not be offside if I said probably we need $50 million, roughly. So how you as elected members decide to fund that, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, it might be through a combination of various policies for which we'll discuss at your workshops, and you have some views about it, but I can't predetermine how you're going to do that. I can give you the quantum, and then you can decide and you can discuss what's the best way to fund it. Thank you.
Mr. Waru, and then Councillor Rokawate. Councillor Rokawate, and then Mrs. Rothwell.
Thank you. I do have just a question, Stavros. Look, can I just say thank you very much for the presentation. And it just made me realise how fortunate we are to have a qualified engineer of your calibre available to us. I'm not trying to, what would you call it? I'll use another expression. I thought of one, but in your pocket. I'm not trying to do that. But first of all, you made it so understandable. that's what I really like when I get reports from you. Make it very user-friendly and for us to be able to understand easily. But because it's a master plan that we're looking at, so are we looking at, a user, well, how would we say that, by 30 to 50 years? Is that what you think this will, it'll have a life shelf of 30 to 50 years?
Thank you, Councillor Tide. I think we believe that this master plan should accommodate the needs of our district for the next 50 years. Now, how fast it needs to be implemented depends on the demand on land and housing and so on. But we feel every time we do infrastructure master planning, we cannot have a short time framework. We really need to have a long-term view, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
Mrs. Rothwell?
Thank you, Stavros. It's really interesting to hear how that is all put together. I'm wondering, are there models for other areas around the lakes? I'm thinking particularly of outlying areas such as Hamarana, where subdivisions are planned.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, the presentation focused attention on the, I suppose, in the major area, major problem areas. But we do our master plan will cover Hamurama, and all other areas that we know got known current and anticipated future stormwater management problems. Thank you.
Kauai, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, as others have said, that was a very helpful overview of the general strategic challenges in this area. At the same time, on page 26, there's reference there to the stormwater issues that people are facing right now to do with flooding. And there's an outstanding issue in that area. I just wanted your assurance that we'll be able to maintain progress on that issue in Hamarana about flooding as we're doing this, this conceptual work about modelling catchments and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I think I've said it a few weeks ago, and I will reiterate from that. I think it's quite important to note that in doing master planning and asset management planning, we've got three distinct phases of work. One is maintain what we've got. We do optimize improvements to what we go through our renewal programs, and also anticipate future demand and do master planning through our upgrade of the system. What you are referring to is not just Hamurama, but other areas too with localized issues too. It's, we're using both our maintenance and our renewal program to do optimized improvements to what we've got at the moment. The master planning have to capture the long-term view. But again, and I know the area you're talking about, but also I also know that a lot of other areas got localized flooding. And what we're doing through our allocation would, for the first time in 2018, the infrastructure strategy made the appropriate allocation for renewal funding for the stormwater. And now we've got some, I think it's a modest resource, but it's an appropriate resource to address, allow us to gradually address these issues as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Chadwick.
A supplementary on Councillor McPherson's for the Nongataha stream restoration and floodwaters there. Can you update us on how that funding will be spent that has been allocated? I think it was 10 million or 11 million.
Your Worship, I think the Regional Council got about $23 million of stormwater, not just for Rotorua, obviously, for the whole of Bay of Plenty. The Nongataha stream, without going into great detail, it's one of the main channels of stormwater management that is under the control of the Regional Council. Options have been identified, engineering options, that's been communicated and discussed with the local reference group. It's been agreed. Now some minor final details are being worked by the engineering group, and we would, I think from estimates, probably we would require about $2-3 million to spend in that stream. So the solutions have been identified, and now just moving into what we call this detailed feasibility, work to be done.
Kia ora. Any further questions on stormwater? Stavros? No? The next presentation, thank you.
Morena Tatou. Oh, no, wait, we've changed.
We've lost the presentation. Okay, this is a very quick update. As you're aware, elected members, we had funding from MBI about certain improvements in our rural areas, $1.1 million, and we have identified together with the Rural Community Board a whole set of areas of activities that would potentially improve general stormwater and presentation and safety in the rural roads. We have embarked together with Infraco, who's our CCO, to undertake a whole range of these works. Again, sort of consistent with the intent of the funding arrangement, we did try to employ people that have been affected by the COVID-19. And obviously, this is a statement from the Ministry of Social Development Regional Market Advisory, just basically expressing an appreciation how we use that money to enable the objectives of the government's intentions. Again, there were sort of some training opportunities given to those people, and you can see that they had an opportunity to achieve additional training and also to enhance whatever skills they already had. Again, sort of you can see the main purpose of that, it was to address areas where it presented a historical deficiency in terms of improved stormwater flows, and to have addressed culverts, and the pictures indicates to use that vegetation, erosion, siltation, and so on sometimes can create inadvertent problems, and this funding allows us to address in excess of 3,000 culverts of similar nature as this one here. And again, another area is just to remove vegetation that, in some respects could potentially create a safety risk for road users. And you can see the stages, how it started to the left as moving to the right, how the sites move. And again, the guys working on these sites, they gain both valuable experience, but also they left behind an outcome that's beneficial to our community, and especially the rural road users. And again, there were a number of trees that were identified that were potentially dangerous to the road users, and you can see in the middle picture there, quite high, high-level trees that, if they fall down in a storm, can potentially block an access road. And obviously, this amount of funding and work allows us to address these historical issues. And again, you can see the people, these are just real people. They're people who've been affected by COVID-19, and you can say, in talking to them and understanding how they see the benefit they're seeing from that there too, it's just their statements. You can read them yourself, I don't need to read them, but the broad direction is that they are grateful and appreciative of the opportunity they had. And, and it's very pleasing to see a good physical outcome, but also a significant human improvement outcome too. And again, Honorable Shirley Tramper, the Chair of the Rural Community Board, it's a testament to how the Rural Community Board sees these works. And again, I think sort of in broad terms, it recognizes that there are multiple benefits arising from that funding. As you know, we have tried to achieve the most we can out of that limited funding, and I think we're making good progress in that direction. In closing, obviously the Infraco, our Chief Executive of Infraco, sees his work as consistent with the intention of Infraco to be a local conduit for skills transfers and employment opportunities. And I think that, again, is consistent with a broader strategic opportunities and strategies of the Council to have a more, not just an economic, but a human face in terms of how we respond to various community needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Mayor Chadwick?
I think that's the most significant part of today's meeting, actually, to see when we went out with Build Back Better that we wanted to look after those that were losing their jobs and the impact on our workforce and our people. That's very heartwarming. You also, great comms to put that story out on our council Facebook. But there are other opportunities that I'm not sure Infracore is ready for, but how do we put them forward? Like one that's come to me this week is about pest control, and I know there's the Jobs for Nature that Te Arawa Lakes Trust has been awarded money for, but I think we need a joined up approach about these other opportunities. Pest control, there's people out there planting, and then we've got pests eating the planting. So I think we could do even more, and I'm not sure if that's a direct approach to Infracore, or is it something through, as we get these opportunities in the Build Back Better, we can actually look at how we can grow our capacity to put more and more people into those jobs. I don't know, like I'll meet them, but it's how we get these other parties all together to say, yes, we can take 25 too and get them active in pest control. And I don't think we've yet got that joined up approach.
I think I think there is an opportunity for us to access funding to do things that have environmental, human, and infrastructure benefits. What do we do as a council? And I would not be flippant about it. It's the fact that we're building a foundation or a network of capability that is based on both our in-house ability and capacities, our associated structures like Infraco, our networks of core service deliverers, and we can network all these things together to access funding that achieves all these three goals at any given time. For each objective, for each opportunity, there are different ways to do it, but the broad objective is to provide a good environmental, social, infrastructure, and human outcome. Now, how we do it, they will be different for each individual case, but certainly by having that capacity and capability, it allows options for us as a council to achieve community well-being. That's how we achieve this.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, and then Councillor Rotorua, and then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros, and thank you, Regan. I just wanted to make a comment, and as we've just read with Ms. Trumper and her comments on Infracore. She and I were invited to tour around with Infracore for an afternoon a week or two ago, and it was just amazing seeing all the work that was being done, that they were carrying out, and not only installing and maintaining the stormwater infrastructure, culverts, and also clearing dumped rubbish as well, where cases of fly tipping had happened. And we also got to meet the vegetation crew. And so actually meeting the staff in Infracore and hearing their stories that they had been unemployed as a result, unfortunately, because of COVID-19, and then having Infracore employ them and provide them with the support. They never would have thought they would have gone into this industry, but they're loving it, and they're loving the support. They're loving to be able to have a paycheck that they can take home to their families. And it was just, again, it was just amazing to see not only the work that they were carrying out, they were doing things that they didn't have to do, but they were still clearing out the rubbish and looking after our environment and our community. And so I see the funding that we voted to go towards Infracore as it's just so amazing. It's just a great thing to do. And one other thing here. What Mayor Chadwick mentioned earlier on about the Jobs for Nature Fund as well, I think, because we have so many conservation trusts around us as well. Trusts like the Canopy Conservation Trust, where they not only are they in ecotourism, but they regularly and routinely set out pest traps and to trap our wallabies, to clear out wilding pines, things like that. And so I think we need a partnership approach to it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Wang. Okay, so now Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you. I just want to follow on from the Mayor and from Councillor Wang, because I actually fear that there's everybody's out there doing their bits, and it really requires now a far more coordinated approach, because it is about what DOC's doing, it's what environmental groups are doing, and everybody's doing something, but there's an opportunity to actually co-design and co-divest in this area, and a better utilisation of resources, and to capture a lot of people that are just sitting there that don't necessarily know what they could use their skills for. And so I think, and so it really comes back to what you said, who's out there spotting the opportunities? And I've got a meeting this afternoon at 1:30 just around this. And, so I just think that it would be good if, otherwise everybody's looking and saying, oh, it's great, somebody's doing something here, somebody's doing, you have a far better reach if everyone knows what's happening and where we could slot in and support that part or add to in this part. It's just better utilisation of the resources, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson and then Mr Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros, my question ultimately is around the 30-year infrastructure strategy that you're working on, but in particular it's in relation to wastewater, and I'm looking at the bottom of 25 and page 26, and quite alarming to read about that cement slurry incursion into the sewer main in Highland Crescent. I'm interested in the costs because there was a search downstream for chunks that may have gone downstream, but it does raise the question about the integrity or the security of our wastewater network and how these incursions take place. Is Regional Council involved in the inquiry as well? And then looking ahead, we've seen these stormwater plans, these structure plans for East Side and Pukehangi Heights, and I know for East Side that's the work that's being done on infrastructure out there enables another 4,000 household units between the Puringa and the airport. So with that level of growth, we're now committed to the future of the main from the wastewater treatment plant to the storage ponds in the forest. I know that's nearing end of life. Does it have the capacity going forward? When do we see that infrastructure strategy, and what degree of costs are we looking for? I guess it all come to us as part of the LTP development.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Have the next 3 hours.
I take it it'll be a workshop. That's all.
It will be a workshop, but just very briefly, Enrique has to present something that's also pertinent to you for your consideration in terms of solid waste management. But obviously, we have spoke about the challenges we've got through an aging network, and we're taking proactive steps in very different areas to manage that. Intrusion by trade waste into the wastewater network obviously is our responsibility, the regulatory responsibility, but now with a new contract into place, it's going to be a collaborative approach with a contractor to monitor and take responsive actions to that. If we need to prosecute, but that will come to the stage. The general network development and management of the critical part of the network will be forming part of our next 30-year infrastructure, and all these various elements will come to you through workshops, and I anticipate we will have some robust discussions in the next few months, so you can make some informed decisions, whatever you think it is appropriate direction in the future. Thank you.
Mr Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koe Stavros. I just add my comments to Shirley's about the rural road work, thank you, of interest to us. But there's an item on page 22 we skipped past, which is of interest to the board. It's around rural road seal extension. And just joining the two things together, this need to create employment and build infrastructure in the current environment, has any thought been given to, well, first question is how much of Puari are we doing this year? Second question, has any thought been given to using the 80 odd kilometres of unsealed road as the basis for creating more of that sort of work and infrastructure during this current COVID period?
Thank you, Mr. Hood. I think there is a council LTP standing policy which allocates about $750,000 for rural seal extensions. We've got, as you said, about almost 100 kilometers of unsealed roads, and I think on average, I say on average because it depends on the location, we should be able to do between 2 and 4 kilometers of seal extensions every year. Some roads are wider, some roads have got different challenges, you know, on drainage and so on. Now, I think it's quite important to know too, though, that these works are not subsidized by NZTA. And they're not subsidized by NZTA because they're simply, when you do the maths, that don't stack up as business cases of improving, you know, a road condition, you know, or the structural amenity of the road. It's simply a level of service improvement. So, to the best of my knowledge, when we see government allocation funding in CIP projects, in the form of Three Water or any other kind of schemes, they have some preconditions which says that this amount of money would be used to achieve tangible environmental or network improvements. And I don't want to preempt it, but you know, I'm not aware of any funding scheme or opportunity which says, well, we'll give you funds to achieve a level of service that does not actually meet basic, you know, business case, you know, ratios. But we'll keep an eye open, and if we have an opportunity, obviously we'll take it. You know, there's no question about it. And then, but you know, we will continue to work on that. But on average, about between 2 and 4 kilometers of seal extensions every year. How far you want to continue it at some point in time is a subject matter of your wisdom as elected members, and you know, because you're controlling the funding allocations, the LTPs. But you know, need to bear in mind that you know you've got a whole range of demands on you, and then you need to navigate carefully through that. But I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waru.
Tēnā anō koe. Kia ora anō, Stavros. Thank you for all your reports. And I agree with what's been said. I always like to hear your reports that are very clear for us. You know, we call us te hunga tutua, ka re tino mōhio. So thank you very much. I've got a number of questions, and I'll try and keep them straight to the point. Also about your report that you've put in here. Can you please confirm whether or not mixing happens with the stormwater and the wastewater? Because I'm not too sure. I saw your presentations around the master planning and all the pipes going here and there. Does that actually happen?
Stormwater enters the wastewater system. And stormwater enters the wastewater system for two reasons. One is because you've got, you know, an old aging network with cracks and dislocated joints. Also because for each individual property may have what you call cross connections, or you don't have a very good control of the gully traps in each individual property. So stormwater floods private yards and goes into the gully trap, from gully trap goes into the wastewater pipe. But in terms of significance, you know, as I said earlier, on average, you generate 20,000 cubic meters of wastewater a day on a dry day. In a wet day, you might go to 40 or 60,000 cubic meters a day. So, but a 10% rainfall event generates 4.8 million cubic meters of stormwater. So the net effect of actually managing wastewater and stormwater are magnitude difference to each other. But it does happen, and obviously we have a program to gradually minimize infiltration.
So it does happen, but very minimal.
Well, it is significant for the wastewater system, and the contract we're starting at the moment places a lot of responsibility and onto the new contractor to identify I&I events and gradually minimize it, because they do have a financial incentive to do that, because that will reduce the operational cost of the treatment plant. So that was one of the strands of the new contract.
Kia ora. I only ask because that's the, he rereke te Māori o te wai, paru me te wai, heke mai a ragi. So these are questions that come to us, and I'm just throwing them out to you. On your plan for the master stormwater plan, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that it's more around the capacity that we're sort of planning for. Are there any other ways, or is there any other technology that sort of comes to mind or has been explored by you and your team in terms of reduction of wastewater, or not wastewater, sorry, stormwater, and or other approaches rather than just building capacity?
Thank you. Again, I prefaced my presentation with the stormwater to say that there are two strands to it. One is the quantity, and I put more weighting on the quantity, but the other element is the quality of water. I think it'd be fair to say, and I kind of remind elected members, when you look into the water quality of Lake Rotorua, the majority of the impact on Lake Rotorua is not from the wastewater system, it's because of all the streams. If you take the average stream and water course flowing into Rotorua, is more polluted and contaminated than the actually treated wastewater. Comes out of the plant. In magnitude order, much higher than that. So when we look into manage the master plan for stormwater, first of all, we need to prevent the risk of flooding and endangering life. But concurrent with that, as you're aware, we are applying for what we call a comprehensive resource consent for stormwater management. Actually, we started now a process with Te Aroa Lakes Trust and affected in Mana Whenua to identify options for improving the quality of water. And that may involve debris arrestos, more increased cleanings of cesspits. The majority of the pollutants entering the stormwater system comes from road surfaces, the roofs, and so on, in terms of heavy metals, benzene, borons, and all these bits and pieces that affect the quality of water. But also the creation of wetlands around the periphery of the lake, of the lake, is a significant aspect we need to take in as part of our resource consent configuration.
Thank you. It's Te Rosi, you answered that and some. So, kia ora, kia ora. I'm moving down to roading reseals. I think Mr. Hurd there just sort of touched on it. I'm wondering, are the Māori road lines in the district being given the same priority as the rural roads? Item 4 on your...
Yes. Well, I think in order of magnitude is quite a different story. I mean, we've got 1,000 kilometers of roading network, about 750 kilometers are rural roads, and obviously, the predominant emphasis is to managing the 750 kilometers of rural roads. Where we have Māori road lines, we have a standing policy which says we work with affected stakeholders or shareholders of those Māori lands to improve them. And you have the recent cases near Kotu, which actually done this work. We have invested generating funds to improve drainage and water supply and road surfaces. So we'll continue to do that. There's no differential between the two of them, but it's just an order of magnitude in terms of scale of each network.
So, so is there consideration for more durable roading solutions that don't generate stormwater for low-use lanes and roads? Given we've just been talking about the master plan.
Yeah, I think this is a part and parcel of our comprehensive stormwater resource consent. We do need to demonstrate current, medium-term and long-term options to control or reduce the amount of stormwater that reaches the receiving points. What you call wetlands, or you can swales, or you can demonstrate sort of high porosity surfaces where you can absorb water, be part and parcel of the whole process.
Tēnā koe. Thank you, Stavros.
Tēnā koe. Final comment from Mayor Chadwick.
Just a comment with watching how the Rural Board worked with Stavros and Infracore. There's nothing to stop Te Tatou o Te Arawa raising some priorities, from an iwi perspective that could be considered as well. That's how the community boards work, and that's how we can work as well.
Kia ora. So we have one final presentation, and straight after plastics we'll take a break.
Morena tātou again, this time. So today I just want to take the opportunity to discuss what's happening at a national level. Our government's currently considering a proposal to phase out single-use plastics. A couple of interesting facts is, that I spotted in the proposal. Without change, global projections are that the ocean will contain more plastic than fish by 2050. Which is a pretty stunning statement, and unsurprisingly, 70% of New Zealanders have high concerns about the build-up of plastic in the environment. Have the clicker, please. So what are they looking at? So you will have noticed in the last slide, it's looking at phasing out single-use plastic. So it's not a dead X chop coming down, nothing, no more. There's a time frame to it. They're looking at doing it over 5 years. The plastics they're looking at phasing out are ones that we don't really have much we can do with them. There's a very limited ability to recycle onshore, in fact none, and overseas markets last year, will be aware, dried up. But on top of that now, New Zealand's now entering into an amendment of the Basel Convention, which essentially means there's just no point sending it overseas anymore. Now some of these have valuable uses. PVC we obviously use for a lot of our piped networks, and that's not being considered for this. You know, our pipes that we stick in the ground, we expect a life of 60 to 80 years. What they're considering here is your container for your yogurt that you're eating. That is simply a better way to do it. And I'll touch on it more there, but you'll see plastics number 7, oxo-degradable plastics. Plastic number 7 is just a general catch-all for other, anything that doesn't fit the previous bits and pieces. Polystyrene also, I'll note, has a lot of good uses in building and in insulation. And for the same reason, that's not going in once off quickly and coming out, it's going in for a number of years, still has some good use. The single-use plastic items at the bottom there, plastic straws are something that stand up. They'll still actually be available because some people in our community need them, either for health reasons or other. So overseas, that's been done where you can no longer buy them at the supermarket, but they might be available at the pharmacy if needed. So what are the plastics? You will have seen all this stuff sort of before, but my favourite's that number 1 there, the PET. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's very recyclable. We can do it on shore, and it can be recycled a number of times. And it has a high value, so it makes sense right now without any type of subsidisation. I think probably the best example we've seen in the recent past is our meat trays. Everyone will probably remember they used to be in those polystyrene, and now we're in that number 1 PET plastic. So it's something we do use a lot and is easily recyclable. And I'm talking about plastics today, but the one thing I did just want to jump in here too, still the best thing we can do is refuse or reuse. If we have that ability to take a Pyrex dish down to a butcher to get our meat that way and then wash it, from an environmental point of view, that's still the best thing we can do. So this is the type of stuff they're looking at getting rid of, as I touched on. And I just wanted to talk a bit more about the others there, because we're talking of banning it, but that's the stuff we see that says recyclable on it and compostable. And now the interesting point of view here is for the majority of this product, it does have an additive which either makes it oxo-degradable, so exposure to oxygen breaks it down, or an additive for UV, so sunlight breaks it down. That does have a benefit. If the plastic becomes uncontrolled, it blows out into our lake or our ocean, it does mean it will break down, so it won't block gills or completely block up stomachs. But all it does is become smaller. It's still plastic, and we end up with microplastics. So it's not really a long-term solution when we look at that first statement that we were talking about. In terms of the quantity of the problem, if we have a look, we've got about 4,700 tonnes of recycling here locally in Rotorua per year. The majority of that you'll see is glass. It's done by weight, this graph here. And plastics are 7%. So about 329 tonnes of plastic per year we collect. In the graph there, you'll see that as a country, we're making some advances, especially with the likes of those meat trays. The largest chunk there is plastic number 1, which is a good thing. Plastics 2 and 5 and plastics 2, the reason 2 comes up separately is the way that they get separated at our facility. So it's combined. And what they're talking about getting rid of is 2% there. So we're talking about 6.5 tonnes of plastic per annum for us here at the moment that we'll be looking at a change. To save confusion here locally, all our collection is remaining the same. So everything that you used to do, you still put in the recycling bin. And the reason we've done that is we didn't want to create confusion with the public. Some people might not want to be turning everything over and what number's this got on it and what number was it again, where does it go? I'm not sure, chuck it in the rubbish bin. The other part is, this is what we're looking at right now. Things may change in the future. It will take a number of years to phase these plastics out. There might be opportunities. We've spent a number of years informing and educating the public on how to recycle. We don't want to try and change that now and then try and change it back later on. So as far as our communications go out, is keep doing what you're doing, and everything that can no longer be recycled is going to be sorted at our facility. It does end up in landfill at the moment, but as we move forward nationally, less and less of that plastic will be available. And from a quantum of the problem, as I mentioned, it's about 6.5 tonnes from this district per annum as it is at the moment. And thank you very much. Take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions? Mrs. Rothwell?
Thanks for that. It's really good to see all of those pictures of the different types of plastic. I'm just really interested in the fact that some of the number 7s clearly state on them biodegradable, and compostable. Is it possible to stop people from advertising that if they're going to ban these things later on?
So absolutely, that's one of the things they're looking at nationally, is actually a scheme of how do we label and what is appropriate to be labelled. Quite simply with these though, they're just not going to be available in the future. It is, and as I mentioned, they can say they're compostable because they are, but they just break down into smaller plastics, a lot of them. And once again, it's a catchphrase, 7 is other. So it may be that there is a product which is truly biodegradable, or mineralisation, which simply breaks down into water and carbon, but it's just not there yet. So yes, is carefully being considered.
Chadwick?
With Scion on the bioplastics and the circular economy, are we linked into that with our waste stream, or is it something that stands completely alone?
I guess operationally they do operate separately, but we do talk with Scion, and I guess we're quite lucky. Our solid waste costs centre manager comes from Scion, so he's got those relationships there as well. Scion's working heavily to try and create points of difference with their plastics as well. It's one thing to take something that's a waste product and then create something that we can use, but how does it stack up? If it costs 100 times more than the virgin product, will the market actually work? Will it be circular? So they're working heavily to create plastics that do different things than what they currently do, and therefore creating a higher value proposition around it. But we are heavily involved with it, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Locality.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at, these are mostly all plastics that we use every day, we get from the supermarket. So I presume that they're going to, obviously over time, replace all these plastics with something else, which is going to be a cost on the, well, I don't know if it's going to be an additional cost on the consumer, but probably follows on from the Mayor's question. Do we have sufficient products to replace all the plastics? I mean, are there people really looking at that to say, so that it's not going to be, the additional cost isn't going to be loaded up onto the consumer? I don't know. I presume that's being taken into account.
Thank you for the question. So yes, absolutely, that's being considered, and it's also the reason for the time frame. So they are in consultation at the moment to receive a lot of feedback, but the document does cover this off. I guess the two parts to it is one, there's no reason why a more recyclable product cannot be used to replace something that they're considering getting rid of. So that absolutely can be used. And the other is cost to the consumer. So at the moment, it sounds a bit silly here, but if you look at some single-use products, it may have an extra cost to the retailer of 0.5 cent per item. And we go, oh, that's just silly, why aren't they doing it right now? But I guess if you look at that from a national point of view and go, as a company, we'll save $500,000 a year by using this other plastic that's not a problem at the moment, it's getting more publicity, so we do see companies choosing to make that choice now. But to the end consumer, there should not be a material difference.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's on 8.7. Is this still part of it in the environmental area? Yeah. Okay. Just touching on the floating wetland, which to me, when we first brought it out, a very innovative, a very creative, huge wetland made up of plastic, Coke bottles and various things and that. In your opinion, why didn't it work and it's been removed? Oh, it might be Stavros.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. If I was going to be sort of short, nothing has been created or material has a indefinite life expectancy. Anything that's been built at some point in time reaches the end of its life, unfortunately. And the materials used for that, wetland, they had a finite life expectancy, and obviously the resource consent period ended. And the question was, do you refurbish the entire thing, or do you replace it with something more robust? And obviously, you are aware that we're creating an extensive wetland near the Hannans Bay, which be more than overcompensate for that. And the point is that because that wetland in Hannans Bay is based on land, is not affected by storms and by the movement of water and so on, it will have a much longer life expectancy. It was a matter of trade-off. I think it did well for the period it was in place, but right now it's time to make some careful considerations where you invest more money into something to last another 10 years, or you invest the same amount of money to last for 30 years. And that's what the decision that had to be made.
Councillor Wang and then Mr. Waru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Regan, and for your presentation. I had two questions. My first one was the period right after Level 4 lockdown, because of the message that Council was pushing out to store your recyclables, because it would have ended up in the landfill anyway for our health and safety reasons. Did we see a massive surge, a massive increase in recyclables?
Thank you for the question. The message was if it was safe and you were able to store your recyclables, then, and if you wanted to, then please do. It required people having that space, making sure there wasn't something left on it, because of course over a period of time we putrefy on it as well, which then becomes a health issue. So we did see a small spike. I wouldn't say it was material or large. I believe most families were going through a pretty stressful time and continued to use their services as per normal.
Thank you. And my second question was, are we pushing the message of waste minimisation in general, just minimise your waste? Because as Ms. Rothwell mentioned, with the compostable, biodegradable products, with plastics, being able to be recycled, often that's it's a kind of like a feel-good factor for some people that they can continue on using this because they think it's going to, using a biodegradable product is somehow better when it's actually not really, as you've mentioned, that it just breaks down into smaller plastic pieces. Is the message of just minimising waste in general being pushed out?
Thank you for the question. And I guess the short answer is yes, absolutely. That's the most important equation of this. Recycling is further down the list. It's if we can just either choose not to use it at all, or if we're going to use it, reuse it again. Then that is the main message we're pushing, rather than recycling solves everything, because it doesn't.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Waru.
Tēnā anō koe. Kia ora e hoa. Just a quick question regarding the waste, plastics, I suppose. Are there still being tests conducted, random tests of, from wherever in Rotorua, residential tests, to see if people are actually adhering to the recycling kaupapa?
Absolutely. So there was obviously a much heightened awareness of that directly after lockdown, because we undertook it at a much higher rate than we normally do. But yes, we still do random audits to make sure, A, that what's contained in the recycling bins is compliant. And on the side, we're also reaching that time of year where just COVID levels have thrown it up and down, where we're starting to do a true swap analysis, where there is a really good look at what does our recyclables and our waste compose at the moment.
Kia ora. Also, can you confirm, please? So, there's been a few people around asking, they didn't take my rubbish because it must have had the wrong things in there or something like that. But is it only those bins that are overfilled that the guys don't take, or do they actually go through and look and then make an assessment right there?
For the waste, the red bin?
Yeah, both.
So for the waste bin, the number one reason by a mile is that the lid is not down and it's overflowing with rubbish, which is why they get rejected. From a recycling point of view, and this touches back again, if your cup says recyclable on it, or a bag says it's recyclable on it, you think it's great and in it goes, but if it's not on the picture under the lid, it can't go in the bin, is the big message. And there's two reasons. The main reason for rejection would be soft plastics. And soft plastics are typically made of plastics number 4, which are actually recyclable. You'll see some supermarket chains have a soft plastic disposal bin where you can put those in. Our problem with them is when it reaches our materials recycling facility, there's a large amount of automation and to separate out those recycling materials, and that glad wrap and those bags just gum up the machine. It's unable to be sorted, and that's the reason why it's not available to be recycled in the yellow bins.
Say something. I think sort of here too is it's the two fundamental principles here. The average rate payer pays a targeted rate for waste collection. The targeted rate entitles them to a level of service. Someone, wants to put a lot more material into the level of service. Basically, they do it, it's not a fair. Just a bit of a funny thing, the average household has got 140 litres of rubbish and 240 litres for recycling. The 240 litres got a yellow top and the waste has got a red top. There was a creative soul the other day that actually painted, it changes the paint, painted the 240 yellow, red and the red yellow, so to put more rubbish into the recycling bin. And obviously it doesn't take long for the paint to peel off, and the collector saw it immediately. So, you've got cases like that, but you need to remember that we do 84,000 collections each week, various types, and the problems are a minuscule fraction of that, of that collection system.
No, thank you. It was just to clarify that, because there's a lot of questions come our way around that, and they didn't take my rubbish bin and all this kind of thing, so we better find out who's painting their rubbish bins. However, Madam Chair, if you beg your indulgence, I've just got two quick ones. Well, Stavros is there. The leachate implementation plan, is that for the landfill, or is that overall, like the old Ngāpuna dump site?
No, it's just the leachate management plan is with regards to the landfill. And obviously, with the capping and sealing of the landfill, we're turning our attention more tightly onto managing the leachate. We expect it to reduce, and obviously reduce a significant risk for that.
Oh, kia ora. And lastly, so what's taken into account regarding other contaminants created by wastewater reticulation, network expansion, and impact on Te Mauri o Te Wai? Are there things happening there?
A lot of things happening, and obviously one of the things, the most important thing is actually gradually with a reticulation program like Rotoiti, Rotomam, Rotoehu eventually, Rotorua eventually. That's the primary consideration, diverting wastewater with all the harmful effects into the lakes receiving environments. The second thing that's happening is subject to our resource consent for the upgraded treatment plant. You will notice, probably not you personally, but the science of the upgrade treatment plant indicates that there is an intensive attention to what we call emerging organic contaminants, EOCs, and at the moment science identified about 70 of these types, and we will monitor against that. There's no doubt in the future there'll be more of that emerging, but the resource consent will identify review periods and scientific sort of review periods to identify new technologies that will continue to eliminate that. So it's a comprehensive approach.
Tēnā kōrua i te rangatira o ngā mahi. Thank you.
O tira, tēnā kōrua, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you to both of you, Stavros. And one of the things I want to point out is that we need to, and I say this because we are still live streaming, is that we do remember, whānau, to wash your recyclables if possible. And the final 3 words from me is reduce, reuse and recycle with care. Nō reira, we'll take a brief break for now, and we'll adjourn back at 20, or we'll make it past. Good 10-minute little break for us. Kia ora tātou. Ka pai, no mai hoki mai tātou katoa. The development of draft climate action plan. Can I please ask for a mover and seconder for the motion that the report development of draft climate action plan be received? Councillor Bentley and Councillor Wang. Tēnā kōrua. Can I put the motion to the vote, please? All in favour, please say aye. Kia ora. And I'd now like to welcome Rosemary and Nikki, who have joined us here today. Yes, JP's over to the side, but thank you, JP, for all of the work you've done too. And ka waiho mā kōrua nei, tēnā kōrua.
Morena koutou. I'd really like to hand over directly to Nikki, who's been doing all of the real work on this on behalf of the strategy team.
Kia ora, Rosemary. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Stavros and Regan for a brilliant and highly relevant introduction to this kaupapa. All the conversation around waste and stormwater is a very important component of this work. So, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm here to support our paper with some background information on where the climate action plan has come from, and also to discuss how we're planning to go out to the community and or proposing rather to go to the community and consult.
Thank you, Nikki. I might also ask you just to bring your mic forward. Just
a bit far away.
Thank you.
Did anybody miss what I said? No? Good. Okay. So basically, our climate change or climate action plan journey began in February 2018 when Mayor Steve had the foresight to join the Rotorua district up to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. At that time, we were one of the only councils in New Zealand to have made that commitment, and it was very important. The GCOM is a voluntary commitment that has a membership of over 10,000 cities now. It's been around since about 2008, but the 2015 Paris Agreement provided strong membership incentive. New Zealand was one of 195 countries that joined up to that particular accord, and as you may well all be aware, we committed to trying to limit the average global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. The main focus of New Zealand's response to that has been the Climate Change Response Zero Carbon Amendment Act 2019, which provides a framework for achieving these global targets, but also sets a national target for all greenhouse gas emissions, except biogenic methane, which is the methane that comes from waste and from agriculture, to zero by 2050. Now, it's really important to note that the targets set by the national government give us guidance, not just guidance, but a directive that the targets that we set for the climate action plan locally must be at least as ambitious as those targets. So being a member of the Global Covenant of Mayors has quite a few requirements in terms of a reporting framework and timeframes. Within the 2 years after submitting or signing up to the GCOM, we have to produce a community carbon emissions inventory. We have to produce a risk and vulnerability assessment. We have to come up with targets and goals for mitigation and adaptation. And I'll draw attention to the timing for the climate action plan, which must be submitted by February 2021 at the latest. And thereafter, every 2 years, we have to submit some progress reports. All of these elements are reported on a public platform, publicly available, and our progress or otherwise will be rated by the governing body. So where are we? Oh, it's quite white, isn't it? Where are we with our reporting? So obviously we signed up to GCOM February 2018. In October 2018, Bay of Plenty Regional Council undertook a regional community carbon footprint for the year 2015-16. Now, we were able to extract from that our district community carbon footprint. Earlier last year, between about March and June, we went with ACOM and organised workshops for councillors, for internal staff, and we reached out to a number of our partners and stakeholders, people in industry, iwi, rural land use, government agencies, and youth, to get to do some education, actually primarily, and to also have some discussion around the way forward with our climate change kaupapa. ACOM worked with us on this. They also worked with us on the Rotorua Climate and Risk Vulnerability Assessment, which was taken in about June 2019. By July 2019, we had a draft climate plan ready to go. Now, for a number of reasons, including local elections in October 2019 and COVID-19 in March 2020, we were unable to consult at that time. So we feel we're ready now to go out to the public and to consult on our draft plan, with a view to having a final plan endorsed by Council by the end of this calendar year. At the moment, we also have ACOM working on an updated community carbon inventory for the year 2018-19. So what will the consultation look like? We're talking about consulting between September and October. We are asking questions: do you agree with our proposed emissions targets, which we've set at 0 emissions by 2050 and 30% reduction by 2030? Now, all of this is in the draft plan. I hope you've had the time to have a look at it. Other questions: do you agree with our proposed adaptation and mitigation goals? And what actions do you think will be the most important? We're proposing a two-pronged approach to this consultation. Firstly, to reconnect with all our primary stakeholders and partners who were involved in pulling together the action plan in the first place. We need to test and validate what we now have in our document with those important partners. I would make a special note here of Te Urunga o Care, which is the Te Arawa Climate Change Group. So they are well advanced with their Te Arawa Climate Change Strategy, and there are strong synergies between the work that we've been doing and the work that they've been doing. And there are opportunities for us to work together to ensure that we connect with the whole of the Rotorua community. We'll also be running a general public online consultation through Kōrero Mai, and we will do and go out to the community and do presentations if requested. What we want to achieve through our consultation, we need to confirm that our emissions targets and the actions that we have for mitigation and adaptation in our plan are what the community believes are the most important to us. We want to ensure the perspectives of local communities and businesses are included. We want to encourage and support partner and stakeholder engagement in and ownership of the project. Now, if you have had a look at the draft plan, there's a large section at the back which is action planning. And against every action plan item, there is a leader for that piece of work, and there's a time frame. It's really important for us to confirm who's going to be delivering an awful lot of this work. You will be aware that, yes, a significant part of the adaptation work falls on the shoulders of councils, and that's because that is the work that we do. But there is a significant amount that has other organisations potentially leading. And finally, but actually probably the most important, we need to begin to socialise the concepts and the priority action areas regarding climate change with the wider general communities. It's important to note that this is not just a one-off engagement exercise, but it's an ongoing conversation with the community to increase awareness of the issues and of what we're planning to do about them, and in response to them. Now, given that our climate action plan is about 45 pages thick, we've come up with a relatively simple version, which is a 2-page A4, which we will be also, it'll be up on Kōrero Mai, and it'll also be in the library, it'll be at customer services, and I'm happy to pass on this simple version to anyone who's interested and would like to put it out into the community as well. Thank you. Any questions?
Mayor Chadwick? And then Mr.
Thank you, Rosemary and Nikki, for bringing that to us today. We've waited a long time for this, and I do remember and should acknowledge too that Councillor Tapsell was asking before the elections, where is it, because we knew the end target. So it's great to have something concrete now to take out. I also just want to mention that I have nominated Fisher, Councillor Wang, as our climate change sustainability lead to be considered for representation on the Mayor's group, and that will go to Hobart for them to consider. I think it's right that that should go to a young councillor to lead and also to learn how global governance work. You may not get there, Fisher. They may not accept you, but they're quite keen for Rotorua to be involved. For me on this, the key, and it's a very tricky time for us to be going out, because I'm very aware that those most interested in this are young people, as well as us, but they're getting to that very cluttered end of their year end with their study. So we've got to find something quick and smart to get their engagement. And I'm sure that Councillor Wing's got some ideas there. And I was thrilled the other day when I met our two Tuia reps. They are very keen to be part of the conversations that go out into the community as part of their commitment to the Tuia program. So it's great that they're rolling their sleeves up. But I just hope that we as individual councillors can take a bit of ownership of helping get feedback and submissions in, because that's what is so important for us as a district going forward. So well done getting it to us now. It's been a peculiar year with COVID. If we could have gone out when we wanted to, we might have been able to have more in-depth conversations, but the timing's quite constrained. But well done getting it to us today.
Kia ora, Mr. Waru.
Kia ora. Kia ora, te mana. Kia ora kōrua. Just a quick question. Well, I suppose what I'm getting at is, what's the end goal? What are we actually aiming for? I know the national one is like zero, as it says in here, zero carbon footprint. What's our one?
So the targets that we're proposing are the same as the national targets. They are equally as ambitious. Yeah.
And just a supplementary question to that too. So do we know the numbers of, or you might have them on hand or you might be able to source them. If Rotorua is doing this, what impact do we have on the whole of the national kaupapa?
I don't have the numbers per se. I would suggest, and this is a personal interpretation, that our contribution will not be hugely significant. But
significant to us.
We all, exactly. It's highly significant to us.
Thank you. I know they're a bit tricky.
Councillor Wang, then Councillor Bentley, and then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question and then a comment. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Nikki and Rosemary and JP for the amazing work that you guys have done on this draft climate action plan. As we've seen, there's been a lot of hurdles that you guys have had to go through with elections, with COVID-19 this year, and so really coming down to this moment, it's groundbreaking, really. The question that I had was relating to the 30,000 hectares that was in the plan that, I guess, for planting to offset carbon. What partnership are we, as council, doing with the rural community in terms of that? Because I think to achieve that amount of land, I think it would be really vital to get the rural community on board, whether it be with a rural community board or with federated farmers. To see sustainability as an asset and an ally rather than a threat. And I think that's what we have to do to go forward, in terms of sustainability and climate change, to see it as something that is going to benefit them in the future, and rather than something that we're, I guess, kind of punishing them for.
Thank you. I think it's really important to acknowledge up front that that there is some really good work being done by rural landowners at the moment with regard to climate change. I sit on another forum where we have some very vocal farmers who are achieving some amazing things within our district. So the Climate Action Plan has a number of pieces of work. Each of those pieces of work in its own right will need quite a lot of padding out and quite a lot of, they'll need budgets, they'll need timeframes, they'll need all sorts put against them. So we have had initial conversations as part of our workshopping with rural landowners, but there's a lot more to be had. So there's also the work that's happening through Ururako, which is about tree planting too, so there's conversations to be had with those ministerial groups as well.
I might also ask JP to comment, to add to that, please, Nikki.
Thank you. Nikki's covered off certainly the thrust of the question there about federated farmers and land use change is still fairly important for our district, and certainly the regional council is also very keen to support initiatives that see land use change because of obviously the other aspect for our catchment around nitrogen. So again, it provides an additional reason and support for that. The other one is we've had meetings and sort of ongoing meetings with the group that came together through the Build Back Better business leaders grouping. So the forestry and wood processing group are also coming together because obviously this is an opportunity certainly for that sector to see additional reasoning and support for tree planting. And obviously that's an important development sector for us as far as the economy is concerned. So that RED facilitated sector group is very keen also to contribute into the conversation because they do see that ongoing future development of more and more forestry across the district, if not the country, which obviously opens up some significant added value wood processing opportunities. So yeah, a very enthusiastic sector to see the value converted from addressing climate change into jobs.
Kia ora, thank you. I'd just like to signal that I would like to move recommendation 2, and I'll leave my comments to when I speak for it.
Thank you, Fisher. Councillor Wang, tēnā koe, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nikki and Rosemary, for your presentation. And I commend you, Nikki, on your obvious passion you have for the subject. My question is to attain these goals that you've set for us. Everything comes at a price. Have you got how much is this going to cost this council or the ratepayer?
So I would draw your attention to the action items at the back of the plan. They're split by mitigation and adaptation. Now, a significant number, as I alluded previously, of the adaptation actions are already underway. So a lot of the activity we are already involved in, and particularly Stavros's team with infrastructural, the 30-year infrastructure strategy. So some of that has been priced. There are other things that we may, through this consultation process, we may decide to prioritise some particular projects and some particular work streams, and we will need to then price them out. I honestly couldn't tell you right now.
Okay. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my questions follow. I haven't completed reading it all the way through. It's quite a substantial document. But I was very much taken by the section on, under the title of emissions reduction actions, particularly Part A on buildings and energy systems. I'm fascinated by systems, macro systems, and I was intrigued with the range of goals involved: efficiency, capacity, sustainable sources, and upgrade the efficiency of public lighting. That reminded me that of the 4 areas that are recommended for attention, we have moved on public lighting, but we haven't, by any comparative sense, moved on geothermal, solar, or wood biomass. There's quite a contrast between our response as a council to those 4 areas. And I wondered if it's going to be possible to, in time for the LTP process, to develop proposals with regard to geothermal, solar, and wood biomass.
I'll defer that question to Rosemary if that's all right.
Good pass.
JP? No. I think one of the things to remember with this proposal is that we're looking at the whole of the community. So there are some things that are definitely council has responsibility, and we're also looking through to a 2050 goal. There's a number of things which are not feasible in the current economic environment, and we expect there'll be a number of changes globally and nationally that will start to put things in a more economic position. And I think, for instance, the street lighting, I mean, that was an economic kind of a decision which has a great climate outcome, but if it had been too expensive, it's probably something we wouldn't have done. So there's a balancing of the levers and opportunities that arise with climate. And Rotorua is a small town and a small country, and we're very reliant on the moods globally and how, but we are seeing things changing, and as those signals change, the opportunities to finance some of these other opportunities around alternative energy and other technologies will become easier over time. So where things aren't necessarily possible and there's not necessarily a budget to do them right now, in the same way that CRP funding has enabled things in a certain time, I envisage that in future there'll be other funding globally and nationally that will help us with some of the actions. But also to recall that some of the actions are not for council to do, it's around how we communicate with our community and keep them engaged with the opportunities. And my sense is at this stage the plan is very much being in a position of readiness for the things that are coming, rather than necessarily leading at every point and trying to budget for things when economically they may not be feasible at the moment.
My supplementary, if I may, thank you, Chair, is how soon can you provide hard copies? This might run against the philosophy of the project, but it would be very helpful if I could have 15 or 20 odd hard copies of this document to take things further. We've been invited to do that, and I'd like to, because I represent a group that are young at heart. Thank you very much.
So just to follow up on that, we would be really happy to give you some hard copies. I mean, we have actually had long discussion about whether we should just say no hard copies allowed because of the kaupapa. But I think it's really important, and particularly perhaps for some of the older members of the community who may not have access to online facilities.
The young at heart. Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua, ladies. I want to follow up on something that Councillor Wang said a moment ago, but before I do so, I'd just like to place on the table that we are 100%. I think I speak for landowners when I say we are 100% behind addressing climate change, because no one confronts it more directly than the poor guys out there trying to feed their stock in the summer when there's droughts and trying to keep their roads open and their stock warm, etc., in the winter when there's great big flash downpours and the like. So we're right in the front end of it, but there is an elephant in the room. All landowners, the elephant in the room is when we look at things like on page 7 of the report, and it's a great report, I'm not being critical, and we see that 67% of the emissions in the area are attributed to agriculture, i.e. farmers. Then we go on to page 12 and we see that that's going to be reduced by 2/3 by 2050. It begs the question how. Excuse me, when farmers see these sorts of numbers of landowners, we become very nervous. And then when we see numbers like 30,000 hectares of pine forest to be planted, and we all know that if that's native, it's more like 200,000 hectares. And we fear that we're going to get 200,000 hectares confiscated to be put into native bush. And so it makes the whole consultation process critical to success. And my view is that the consultation in this is miles too short and miles too narrow. And we need to include the Federated Farmers, the Beef and Lamb, the Farm Foresters Association, the Institute of Foresters, etc., in these discussions to get the facts out there. Because the facts are that a lot of land that's currently being farmed, particularly with dry stock farming, can be more economically placed under trees. Now, that's not commonly known, but when there's not information and facts in the marketplace, the gossip turns into gospel. And so the gospel in the marketplace among the landowners is, hey, they're going to take off my land and put it in non-productive trees and I'm screwed. So the consultation around this is absolutely critical if it's going to succeed, to get the facts in the marketplace. Take your time, involve all the parties and do it well. It's a comment, not a question. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will have some comments to make when we get to that stage. Thank you. But I just wanted to ask about the measuring progress on this. Is that done externally? I didn't pick it up on here. I might have missed it. Are we going to, I mean, obviously we're setting our own internal targets and how we're doing, but will that be done by a framework that we've set or is set for us? How do you envisage that happening? And will it be annually? No, okay, thank you.
So basically the framework requires us to complete a community inventory every couple of years. And so that's why we are currently with ACOM redoing our community inventory. And that will show us if we've made any progress over the previous period. Now, we're not expecting to see a huge difference, actually, to be honest, in the two from 2015-16 to 2018-19, because we haven't actually had a climate plan in place, although, of course, we've been doing a lot of adaptation work. So that will be how we will look at the changes. Yeah. And we will report that through the Global Covenant of Mayors.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Comments, yes, but not questions.
Oh, okay. So we have a mover for the motion, which is that the committee recommends to council to approve the draft climate action plan for wider community engagement. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. And I'll invite now around for discussion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to, when we were first talking about this, and it wasn't, and I do give credit in particular to Councillor Tapsell, because as a young person, and it seems to be the young people who are pushing this, that we stop trashing their world as well. But I wasn't supportive of really a whole 100% behind it, because I thought, what difference will it really make? Well, I have to say I have been converted. I absolutely have been converted, and I'm very, very supportive of this. Recently I was reading an article where once China closed their ports to accepting trash from around the world, all of the developed countries were worrying. And of course what's happened in Africa now, they've upped taking all this trash from overseas. And I just want to say to Mr. Hurd, it's not the farmers that export their trash. It's not them. It's everybody else, the consumers who use plastic and everything else. But so really, I want to support. Can I just say, Councillor Wang, thank you, Your Worship, for putting his name forward to local government, because it does tend to be the younger people who are really much behind this, and they are concerned, and they do expect us to show leadership on this. To the question of, well, will it make a difference? This is just the Rotorua Lakes Council. Everything makes a difference, and it starts somewhere. And so often, change happens on the fringes, and then within 15 to 20 years, it's just absolutely normal process, normal the way we go about things. And this really should be how we do business. So, as I say, I was not supportive because I thought it won't make a difference, and I'm absolutely converted that this will make a difference, and I certainly will be voting in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Donaldson and then Mayor Chadwick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fully in support of this. I would love to see the younger school children engaged in the consultation, and I accept that it's a tricky time of the year for them, but I agree with Councillor McPherson that the older generation also have a lot to contribute, because we have a sense of responsibility for what's happened to our environment. The subject of cost of implementation has been raised, and I think any response to the cost of implementing the plan needs to be weighed against the cost of not implementing the plan and the cost of doing nothing. Geothermal, it's not quite correct that this council hasn't already moved on geothermal. We've geothermally heated this building. We work collaboratively through the Geothermal Liaison Committee, and our staff have been involved in collaboration with Regional Council over the use of or the replacement of wellheads in the Rotorua geothermal field to ensure that the most efficient use of the resource is optimised. So, yeah, fully in support, and I think actually the ultimate endorsement came on 7 sharp last night when Herman the Tortoise predicted a long, hot summer. So let's go.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Mr. Waru?
Ana kai te pai whenoko hea waku kōrero David.
Kia koe te manukura.
Well, totally in support. And this isn't just a young person's issue. It has been a movement, actually, and it's not transformational. This is an iterative process that you've got to bring the community with you. And I can remember the time we talked at this council table about introducing a recycling system. And there was a group that said it's outrageous, it's going to cost more than the benefit to the community. And we had those debates in here, and we supported the investment in supporting the recycling system. So everything adds to this. It's not just having a plan, it's actually everything we do, such as infrastructure, community gardens, food resilience, the best use of geothermal for the potential use of geothermal for growing food in our community. There is so much more that we can do, and we're seeing that with some of the provincial growth fund investments in helping us look at geothermal as a whole district. How exciting that is. So this is a process. I agree with Mr. Hurd, but also the consultation is happening at a national level. So this is a compact, really, of mayors that signed up to an accord and then says, what can we do in our district? And that's why we've got now what was a strategy. Thank gosh, at last it's a plan. And it is going to be a conversation that's going to be huge out in the community. We can do what we can, going out with the targets that are set in the plan, getting them affirmed, or even finding that they are big community challenges. We do have to get on with it. We've got to meet the timeframes of our commitment as global mayors, and but that's not a reason not to do it properly. But you start the journey with taking out our plan and getting our community response. I see it best starting in our kura, in our children, our little children, actually, who think sustainably and act sustainably. And they are the reminders, Mr. Waru, about my moko tell me you can't put that plastic in that bin, and why are you buying it in the first place? And where are your bags to take into the supermarket? So it's every way in which we live, and that's where we get the biggest community change. But we are now 6 years so much further down the track than when we had the big discussions in our community about our strategy. So our strategy is now a plan. I'm fully supportive of it. Can't wait to hear the community's response. And well done for getting it to us.
Tēnā koe, Otira, tēnā koe, Mr. Waru, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Kare tino ro te kōrero. I think there's a nice little proverb that we use, and it goes a bit like this: Whatu ngaro ngaro te tangata, toi tū te rangi me te whenua. So basically saying, though we may perish, the land and the sky remains. Nā reira, he nui ngā kōrero kai roto I tēnā kōrero. So I just wanted to put it out there that yes, Aotearoa, mai rāno, e pērāna ngā whakaaro. This is, now we're just putting it into an action plan and all those kind of things. I would like to not, how do I say it nicely, would like to aki. How te kupu Pākehā mo te aki. Te aki, to, give you that. That te urunga o kia have some pretty good kaupapa within their strategy. And, I te mutunga iho, what Te Arawa, what Māori, what Pākehā, kare aha. We all want the same thing, really. So I'm guessing, and I'm willing to bet that probably the council strategy is not going to be too different from the Te Arawa strategy, which is not too different from the global strategy. You know, I te mutunga i hoka hoki anō ki tēnā kōrero, whatu ngaro te tangata, toi tūterangi me te whenua. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Dawiri. Whatira kia koe, Uncle Trevor, followed by Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wholeheartedly support the recommendation, and I'll also put my hand up because I feel very guilty, and the Mayor was right. The councillors in the past voted against any moves often, and sadly I was one of them against the recycling in the bins, but now I am a supporter and a promoter. Help with all your mokopuna who tell you what you should be doing. But no, you know, it was just looked upon as the too hard basket, and yeah, this is not just a Rotorua problem or Aotearoa, it's a world problem, and we're working on it. And I think of, even at this time, think of how hard Councillor Hunt from day one when she came onto this council, and strive for the mahi that you're talking to us now about, and should be pleased with the efforts that we're making in that now. And I also support the fact that we are looking to Councillor Wang to represent us well. I'm sure they would give a tick knowing that Rotorua is right behind it. But with that, strongly support the moves that are happening. Kia ora koutou.
Ka pai. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I want to add my voice in support of this proposal and compliment Nikki and Rosemary on an excellent way of stimulating the debate, discussion in this area. I look forward to the hard copy and the copies and mobilising support for this. I see this as a secular social movement that's going to transform our world. What little part we can play in that, locally, in support of this international movement, wonderful. I was reminded by a previous speaker that by 2050 there'll be more plastic than fish in the sea. Now, I took that as a message from God that it's time to spend more time fishing. But in the interim, I'll give strong support to this movement. Thank you both very much. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. Whatira kia koe, Councillor Wang.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, thank you. First off, I would just like to thank Mayor Chadwick, actually, for taking the bold and brave step on signing Council up to the Global Covenant of Mayors on Climate and Energy, and also the UN Global Compact. It was such a brave step, and now looking at the benefits and looking at how the world's changing, and other councils jumping on as well, they're seeing that this is something that they probably should have done quite a while ago. Carrying on to Mr. Hurd's comments about the rural sector, I really liked how in this draft plan that I think for far too long the rural sector's always been accused, always been finger pointed, but in this plan it takes a practical approach, and again it links to what I said earlier, to help our community for partnership, and also to see sustainability as an asset and an ally rather than a threat. I think that's really important. I tautoko Councillor Rokawa Tate's comments that that her view on this has changed, and I agree, because change is scary, but change is needed, and that's the attitude that that we're seeing around the world right now. With Council signing up to the GCON and the Global Compact, we're held to account, and we have to, meet certain targets, as Nikki and Rosemary have said. Everyone has a role in protecting our environment and our world, and we all, in sitting around this table, have a role to play. We are liable, and we have a responsibility to our community. There will be those who believe that climate change is a hoax, and what I have to say about this is that the science is there. The numbers show that 2016 was the warmest year and 2019 the second in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and NASA's 140-year climate record. In fact, the last decade was the warmest decade recorded in history. Climate change encompasses not only rising temperatures, but also extreme weather events, shifting wildlife populations and habitats, rising seas, and a range of other impacts, all of which will affect us. Whether you believe in climate change or not, we have a responsibility to leave our future generations with a world that they can live in. We have a responsibility to invest in our infrastructure, mitigation and adaptation strategies to prepare our future to better prepare our community for more frequent and severe weather patterns that we know is already happening. Now that we're in a Build Back Better mindset, I support this practical plan going ahead, and that is why I'm happy to move this recommendation, and I urge other members around the council to do so as well. Kia ora, thank you.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Wang, and it is with that too, and acknowledging you, and I would also like to acknowledge Councillor Tapsell in her absence, having been the spearhead and a very young councillor at that when she first came on to introduce her passion towards this kaupapa. Nō reira, kia kōrua tahi, a ka mihi kau atu kia kōrua. I would now like to put the motion to the vote. That the committee recommends to council to approve the draft climate action plan for wider community engagement. So we have a mover with Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Donaldson, and can I just get a clear indication as to whether or not we can have an aye on that? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, Marika, yes. So that's a unanimous, unanimous vote. Thank you very much, and kia ora. Right, I think we're up to our final item. So with that, this is the resolution to go into public excluded.
We need to. Madam Chair, do we actually need to go
I'll just advise us that the only matter in public excluded session is to adopt the confidential minutes of the previous meeting. If no corrections of discussion are needed, can I please ask for a mover and seconder for the motion? Okay, Mr. Oh, okay, I'll read the motion. I'm nearly there. That the confidential minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting held 6th August 2020 be confirmed as true and correct. And we have Mr. Waru. Okay. Yes, sorry, I'm just having to pause on that because if there are any, then we will need to go into confidential. Everybody's fine? Ki te kore, ka pai tira. So, thank you for that. And tēnā koe Councillor Rotorua Tate, o tira kia koe anō ki Councillor Donaldson.
Ka pai.
Ka pai. Now I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Kia ora tatou, nō reira. Au ti tērā o a tatou nei hui, taku hui tūtahi. So thank you very much. And with that, I will close our hui.
Kei te mihi atu ki a koe te tiamana i tō hui tū. Karawe, kia tātou katoa.